We tend to think and speak about thinking as if it is a process that happens uniquely inside our heads. But research in cognitive neuroscience and philosophy of mind is challenging this in-the-head version of cognition and arguing instead that cognition is not something that only happens uniquely in the head, but also requires the whole body and also elements of the environment that surrounds us. I'd like to share with you a video of a class that I taught at City University of Hong Kong, where I'm trying to engage undergraduate students with this idea. And I'm using examples to illustrate people thinking with their bodies and the local environment in everyday contexts of interaction. The concepts are embodied cognition, extended cognition, and enactive cognition. And the examples come from a new book that I'm writing for Cambridge University Press called The Body Language Myth: Understanding Gesture in Language and Communication. This video might be interesting to you if you work in an area related to face-to-face communication, and more specifically if you're interested in the relationship between body, language, cognition, and interaction. I'll put a timestamp in the description below so that you can skip ahead to those parts that you think might be of most interest to you. Sorry to interrupt, let's begin. So I just introduced one model of embodied cognition, and it's based on Lakoff and Johnson's approach to cognitive linguistics, and looking at the role of the body in language, but also looking at how the body is also available for and implicated in cognitive tasks that are maybe less overtly linguistic, like measuring, comparing, counting, quantifying. However, almost 40 years have passed since Lakoff and Johnson proposed this theory of embodied cognition for cognitive linguistics. So during this time, what was perhaps the major appeal of the embodied cognition of cognitive linguistics, which was the embodied mind, has become one of its major criticisms. And we'll just go back to Malafouris briefly. Malafouris says, "No doubt by grounding cognition in bodily experience we have taken a step forward, resolving the traditional mind-body dichotomy. Nevertheless, what this step essentially implies for the proponents of embodied cognition approach is simply an expansion of the ontological boundaries of the res cogitans, rather than the dissolution of those boundaries altogether. Transposing the conventional demarcation line of human conceptual architecture outside the brain, but still inside the skin, the embodied mind approach has created a sort of embodied cognitivism in which the material reality remains external and epiphenomenal to the cognitive structure." Basically, they're saying, good work for embodied cognition. What you did is you showed us that the body plays a role in thinking, and that thought is fundamentally part of the body. It's related to the body, and it's the way we use our bodies to move and think. But is there not more to it than this? And Jensen, Thomas Wieben Jensen, who I mentioned at the beginning, blames the confinement of cognition within the body on a seemingly logical assumption, namely that since cognition is profoundly embodied, and since our bodies visibly have physical boundaries that separate us from the surrounding environment, then cognition too must be, by definition, be a bounded phenomenon tied to an individual body and reserved to processes in the head. Okay, so this is a new wave of philosophy of mind and cognitive science that's challenging the idea that the mind is embodied. Not in the sense that it's rejecting the role of the body in thought and thinking, but it's rejecting locating the mind as solely within the skin of the person. So everything I showed you so far, the examples, all involve people moving their bodies in order to think. But there are other ways that we can think of cognition as going beyond the body, to include objects and elements in our local environment. And this is where Andy Clark comes in. Because if cognition is not in the brain or in the body, or not only in brain or only in body, then where is it? And this is Andy Clark's theory of the extended mind. So what is the extended mind? In a paper that was published in 1998, Andy Clark and Dave Chalmers, they made an observation that there's a general tendency for human reasoners, people who think, to lean heavily on their environment. They said the human organism is linked with an external reality, a physical reality in a two-way interaction, creating a coupled system that can be seen as a cognitive system in its own right. Right? So maybe cognition is embodied and cognition is in the brain, but could cognition be outside the body as well? Could it be when humans interact with elements of their environment that we have thinking as well, cognition emerging? So we're going to watch a video of an interview with Andy Clark, who is one of the main proponents of the theory of extended mind. And he's being interviewed by Robert Lawrence Kuhn, who is a public intellectual with a PhD in cognitive neuroscience and founder of a series of interviews with academics and philosophers on topics such as cognition, awareness, and the existence of God. So Kuhn is asking Clark to explain his theory of extended mind and to defend it. But I'm going to give you a few examples that are classic examples of objects being used outside the body that are performing a task that is that if it were performed inside the head, we would have no problem in calling cognition. And the first one is the abacus, which is a way of calculating again. Now it's not using the fingers, it's using an external object, which is this wooden thing here. Simple device for calculating, consisting of a frame with rows of wires or grooves along which beads are slid, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. So I'll just show you how one of these is used. So one thing Andy Clark might say is that how this is working is that cognition is being offloaded onto the environment, which is designed in a way to facilitate certain behaviors that enable forms of thought and calculation. And if you're really clever, you could do that calculation in your head and you would have no problem in saying that's cognitive process. But could you call that abacus part of your cognition? Can you refer to your cell phone as part of your cognition, part of your mind? That's where the debate is. So that's one example, is the abacus. Another example, which is often used, is the blind person's cane. And I'm going to show you a video by a person called Maureen, who has a YouTube channel called BreakingBlind. She describes herself as a totally blind woman living life to the fullest, not letting anything get in the way of what I want to do and where I want to go. And in this video, she's going to explain how she uses the white cane. And this cane is often used as an example of extended cognition. And again, there are some questions on the handout for you to think of. Why does she prefer to use a straight cane? Why is a metal tip good? What kind of things can she find with her cane? How does she know that she has entered a hallway or an alcove? So think of these questions as we now watch the video. The link to the video will be in the slides. You can watch the rest of it at some point. So why does she prefer to use a straight cane?
It provides better reaction time and tell the echoes better.
Okay, good. Provide better reaction time and can tell the echoes better. Yep.
She can also go faster.
And it allows her to go faster. Okay, good. Why is a metal tip good?
Locate the echoes and feedback from the tips.
Locate echoes and feedback. Okay, do you know what an echo is? Okay, it's when the voice reverberates in a room. Okay, here's a bit why she has a metal tip at the end.
Tip helps you locate echoes, and you get a lot of feedback from your tip.
Okay, so echoes, feedback. What kind of things can she find with her cane?
Objects.
Objects.
Curve.
A curb, like sidewalk.
Corner.
Corners. What else? What about here?
So cool.
The stairs.
And so what I mean by reaction time is not things there. So like that, so now I move, there's a curve there, and down that drop off. And I can tell by here that this is asphalt and this is sidewalk.
Side block.
A drop off, right? So she can feel something that's dropping away. What does she say about the difference between the road and the pavement? Texture. So you can feel the texture. One of them is asphalt, like tarmac, and the other one is probably concrete, slabs of concrete. How does she know that she has entered a hallway or an alcove? The echoes. Okay. So a lot of people think that the cane is just like a feeler. Like you can feel things that are further away from the body. But actually, by tapping the cane, you also get another sensory motor experience, which is sound. And through hearing different sounds, you can reconstruct the environment that's around you, whether you're walking through a tunnel, whether you're in an open space, and even whether there are other things in your environment, like other people. Okay, so there are many other ways that the blind person here is getting sensory motor experience or feedback, and she's using this tool to do that. And she says things like, I need the cane to hit things because that is how I know they are there. Okay, and how do we know, how does a person who is not blind know that something is in the way?
Just see it.
You just see it. Okay, so that's vision. And instead of vision, the blind person has the tip of the cane and can feel. But the result is the same, knowing whether or not there's an object in the way. And later in the video that I didn't show, she says, I look with my cane. So this is an example of extended cognition. And this is how Andy Clark, who we just saw, explains it. He says, sensing and moving are the spots where the rubber of embodied agency meets the road of the wider world, the world outside the agent's organismic boundary. The typical human agent feels herself to be a bounded physical entity in contact with the world through a variety of standard sensory channels, including touch, vision, smell, and hearing. The use of simple tools can lead to alterations in that local sense of embodiment. Fluently using a cane, like this woman Maureen does, we feel as if we are touching the world at the end of the tip. The cane is somehow incorporated to our bodies. The effect is more like bringing a temporary whole new agent world circuit into being. So the tip becomes part of the person's experience of the world around them, just like we have sight and smell and taste and touch. The way they use the tip is just like another source of sensory motor information. And this brings us to Gallagher, who makes a distinction between the body image and the body schema. So the body image is how you might see and perceive and have attitudes about your own body when you see it, as you might do in a mirror, the body that's looking back at you from a mirror. But this is different to a body schema. A body schema is not a set of perceptions, beliefs, or attitudes about your actual body that you can see. Rather, it's a system of sensory motor functions that operate below the level of self-referential intentionality. It involves a set of tacit performances that play a dynamic role in governing posture and movement. And in most cases, movement and maintenance of posture are accomplished by the close to automatic performances of a body schema. So, if we look back at the example of Maureen using the cane, we might say that her body schema has incorporated this extended cane and its tip as part of the body. And that's the way that it can become incorporated into what Clark calls an environment-organism loop or a circuit of feedback that functions for all intents and purposes as part of the body. This leads to an approach to thinking about cognition that is a bit different to just an extended version. This is what Varela and colleagues 1991 say cognitive structures emerge from the kinds of recurrent sensory-motor patterns that enable action to be perceptually guided. So the keywords here are emerge, enable and guide. So they reference a gradual and bidirectional process between the body and its environment. And the way that we adjust to our environment and the way that our bodies adjust to the experience we have in an environment that we need in order to accomplish cognitive tasks, whether they're very simple ones like choosing an orange, or whether they're more complex, such as like viewing a painting or fielding a baseball. So Gallagher says the embodied mind dynamically responds to the world rather than represents it.
And this is similar to what philosopher Alve Noe says, when he says that perception is not something that happens to us or in us, it is something that we do.
And let's just have a look at some examples of how this works again. Clark gives the examples of cocktail waiters. How many of you like the odd cocktail? Every now and again, a little cocktail? Yeah? Well, have you ever seen barmen or barwomen preparing cocktails? Right? You see them mixing the drinks. Have you ever seen them in a busy bar where they have a row of orders to complete? Sometimes what they do is they line up the cocktail glasses depending on what kind of drink has been ordered. Because each cocktail glass, it depends what kind of bar you go into, but often cocktail glasses are designed for one specific cocktail. And I don't know the names of them, but this might be a martini, this might be a Bloody Mary, this might be a screwdriver. I don't really know the names of them, but one way that waiters improve their efficiency of making the drinks on time and remembering which drinks to make are with these glasses that already index the kind of drink that they need. Okay, so Clark says that what these glasses do, they create persisting spatially arrayed stand-ins for the drink orders, and thereby they actively structure, the waiters can actively structure their local environment to press more utility from basic modes of visually cued attention, action and recall. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of this. What I want to show you is the role of the environment in thinking, and especially in organising and planning, which are highly complex cognitive activities. And just before, you need to think about Kirsh, and Kirsh talks about the intelligent use of space. How we manage the space around us is not an afterthought, it is an integral part of the way we think, the way we plan and the way we behave, a central element in the way we shape the very world that constrains and guides our behaviour. So just like the cocktail glasses can stand in for an order, and they can help the waiter manage the orders that need to be done without needing to think exactly which drinks needed to be made, because that's already included in the kind of glass that's waiting for them. The way that we use the space around us can be very intelligent as well, the way we organise things. Okay, so she has all the dumplings laid out on the table. And without knowing, there is actually a lot of cognitive structure or conceptualization on this table. And until she explains it, you might not know what it is. But each one of these areas of the table has a specific purpose. So let's see. All I do is I ask her to say, what are these different areas? And she explains that. So that's obviously part of her thinking of how she's organizing the dumplings.
Sorry, 我没有回答你的问题。
Oh, sorry, you need to understand Mandarin. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Otherwise, I could translate for you if you want.
这几个我们放到那个水上，我们去做这里，然后这里呢我们煎，这里呢我们做一个那个水的，然后这个呢是你的 lunch tomorrow， 然后这个呢是 tomorrow 的 lunch。
好，我太幸福了。
Every day.
2、4、5、6、2、13个。
够，
一个 lunch。
一个 lunch 够了。
好 ，perfect。然后这里我们就煎饺，好不好？
好。
这里呢煎饺，这里是水饺，太多吗？
No。
这样子。你一个人可以吃这么多？
可以的。那你呢？
吃这么多啊？你吃几个？
好。
Okay,
baby.
No, baby.
Okay, baby. Okay, so if you just have a look, these ones here are for frying, and over here is for boiling, and here is lunch. These two are lunch, and this one is tomorrow's lunch, and this one is the day after. Okay, so there are these categories, and categorization is a prototypically cognitive task, but you can see how the environment is used to categorize, and it's also used in a way for decision making and planning. In this case, it's used, for example, for the provision of food. Like if you think these ones are being saved for future lunch, these ones we're going to eat tonight. So there's something quite primitive about this scene as well, of like deciding what we'll eat now and what we'll save for later. Now, in this example, you have some structure already built into the environment. You have the bowls, right? And bowls contain a certain amount, and plates. So there's already some structure in the environment. But what I want to show you next is she's using the table, and it doesn't have any like structure into it. So that example just had some bowls. But now I want to show you. Okay, she's been shopping.
Oh.
Yeah, big major shop day. She's come back, and the first thing that she does is lay everything out on the table. And I come back and I see it like this, and I just ask her to explain what it all is. So I want you to have a listen to her explanation. Again, thinking of how the environment can be used to organize and to categorize things.
一个擦脸的，我一个擦脸的，我一个面膜，你一个巧克力，一个 teeth， 然后这个也是我自己的，然后这两个吃的，这4个面膜，其实也不多啦。
这个呢？
哪个？后面呢？这些都是送的，都是我买多少1000多，然后就送什么这样子，都是送的。
Yeah, well, I've got it in English here, so you can have a look.
Oh, your chocolate, yay. Teeth? What is teeth? Teeth thing?
Teeth is like a little tooth cleaner thing.
Oh.
Have a look at the way it's organized. You have individual items like your face cream, my face pack, your chocolate, my thing. I wasn't allowed to know what that was, apparently. Teeth, like something, for the bathroom. And then these things here, this is a different kind of category, edibles, right? 这个是吃的. Right? Yeah, so collected together. And then these are 面膜, face masks. Yeah. And then this is 送的.
Oh,
Freebies.
Oh, quite nice.
Alright? So can you see there are different levels of categorization? You have individual items, and also they're allocated to different people, like your chocolate, my cream. But then you have another level of category, which is like face masks, or things to eat, or things that were given. There is a lot of conceptual structure and knowledge and organization going into to that array of objects on a table. Oh yeah, so Andy Clark says, when, for example, you group your groceries in one bag and mine in another, or when the cook places washed vegetables in one location and unwashed ones in another, the effect is to use spatial organization to simplify problem solving by using spatial proximity to reduce descriptive complexity. So by grouping things together, you create these categories that help you organize and manage them. Let's see, it is intuitive that once descriptive complexity is reduced, processes of selective attention and action control can operate on elements of a scene that were previously reduced, previously to unmarked, to define such operations over. These are just ways that she's thinking and the ways that she's interacting with the space around her and with objects as a form of thinking. And in the last part of class, I want us to be thinking about, are there any applications of this model of cognition? And it's often called a 4E model of cognition because I mentioned embodied cognition, I mentioned extended and inactive, and there's also embedded cognition that I haven't discussed. We started with the metaphor of writing as thinking. You often hear that, oh, writing is like thinking. And we've tried to introduce some of the philosophy of mind and cognitive science. We've used examples to illustrate aspects of extended mind and intelligent use of space, and I think this applies to writing.